Hey again guys, so I'm back with another review, and that is on Article 5 by Kristen Simmons, and as always I'll read the back of the book. New York, Los Angeles and Washington DC have been abandoned. The Bill of Rights has been revoked and replaced with the Monroe Statutes. There are no more police, instead there are soldiers. There are no more fines for bad behaviour, instead there are arrests, trials and maybe worse. People who get arrested don't usually come back. 17-year-old Ember Miller is old enough to remember that things weren't always this way. Living with her rebellious single mother, it's hard to forget that people weren't always arrested for reading the wrong books or staying out after dark. It's hard to forget that life in the United States used to be different. In the 3 years since the war ended, Ember has perfected the art of keeping a low profile. She knows how to get the things she needs, like food, stamps and hand-me-down clothes, and how to pass the random home inspections by the military. Her life is as close to peaceful as circumstances allow. That is, until her mother is arrested for non-compliance with Article 5 of the Monroe Statutes, and what's worse, one of the arresting officers is none other than Chase Jennings, the only boy Ember has ever loved. Okay, so this is an ARC copy. The actual published version I think is going to be hardback. So I received this back in December, but I left it till now to read it because that's when it's coming out. And cover-wise, well, it's a dystopian, so fairly sort of typical of a dystopian cover. I think the people that they chose, or modelled down in this colour, is pretty good, and the clothes they're actually wearing is accurate. I know sometimes that they put on covers things that just they're thinking, have these people that have designed this cover ever read the book? But no, this is a great cover for the book. And I have to say, I'm not a huge dystopian reader, unlike Jess, who devours dystopian. I have read very few dystopians. You can count them on one hand how many I have read. I've only read the first two in the Hunger Games so far, Dark Parties by Sarah Grant and Divergent. That is the extent of my dystopian reading. And this, it's not my favourite book, I will say that. It took me ages to get into this book. I found it really hard to get into. I don't think it was even that slow at the beginning, but it just didn't grip me in any way. And I was really disappointed that it didn't wow me. It took me about 3 days to get past 100 pages, I think, which is rare for me. I normally aim to read 100 pages a day at least, so it just wasn't happening. And then it hit like halfway through, and I found I was really into it and was loving it. I give this a 3.5 out of 5. I wouldn't take my word completely on this book because, like I said, I'm not a huge dystopian fan. So if you are a huge dystopian fan, you will probably really like this book. I'm not saying I'm not a dystopian fan either. I'm just saying I'm not, I'm not a huge reader of it. Like, I read Divergent by Veronica Roth, loved it, devoured it, thought it was absolutely amazing. So unfortunately I tend to judge dystopia now by that, and I know that it's wrong to do that, but I can't help it because I just love that book so much. Having said that, I loved this book for the reason that it felt scarily realistic. It wasn't an elaborate setup like, say, the Hunger Games, where these kids are taken and put in an arena to fight on live TV. It's not like that. It seems very realistic. It could happen because it's not like someone closes a dome over the country. It's a governmental thing. A war takes place. I will say this, that I wanted to know more about this war. Everything hinges on this war taking place, and yet we don't know who it was with, what happened, why did this emerge. We don't really get that. We just get, it just says after the war, and then, well, what happened during it. I don't know what this war was. So I thought that needed to be clearer. yeah, and it's this government then takes over and they make amendments to the Bill of Rights, and all these articles are put in. You can no longer read books that are deemed unsuitable. They change the curriculum. It just felt realistic, and I loved that about it. Um, the romance in this I enjoyed as well, because Ember has loved Chase forever. He used to live next door, and they were best friends. And then a couple of years ago, romance emerged, and he admitted he loved her, and she was like, "Oh, I love you too." And then the government draft him to become one of them, like minions, basically, to become a soldier, and everything sort of changes. And the romance, I think, was really well done in this book, because it's not thrown at you. It's a very sort of subtle thing. You don't know, does Chase still love her, or has he really been conditioned by the which are known as the Moral Militia? Um, and her mother is taken away from her, and she's basically trying to get back to her mother, and you don't know if something more sinister has happened. It's all, a lot does happen in this book, and the twist, you probably would guess what happens, but you don't guess the extent of it, and I found myself shocked, and then I had to keep reading. I believe this is book one. I hope it is, because I think it needed more. Really needed more to it. I didn't think it had enough. What happens after the war and everything, that's really well done. It's well thought out. But I just needed a bit more background, because I felt that was what was lacking. And sometimes I really didn't like Ember. She makes some stupid decisions. She's a bit like a damsel in distress, and she has this fiery attitude, but then it doesn't come through in her actions. I just find her a bit of a whiner. Like, again, comparing it to Divergent, Triss in Divergent is a completely kick-ass heroine. For me, she was a bit like a wet blanket, and while Chase is this soldier, I feel like she relied so much on him, and I didn't like her character much, and she blames an awful lot on Chase, and I just, like, I know she's in a bad situation in this book, but she's far too selfish. Um, so those are my feelings on Article 5. I did give it a 3.5 out of 5. There was so much that I loved about this book, but I just felt in places it was a little lacking. But again, I wouldn't, take my word so much on Article 5, because, like I said, I haven't read a wide range of dystopia. So yeah, but the realism to this is what I really loved, and that came through. And I was reading it at the time thinking of V for Vendetta, the movie, because I always say, oh my god, that's scary. It's not, gory, scary. It's scary because it feels, while you're watching it and like reading it with this, it just feels like that could happen, because of the nature of human beings. It feels very real. If you've read this or plan to check it out, let me know what you thought of it, and as always, happy reading.